but it was her environmental work that inspired community action and led to many new initiatives. She led the Orangeville Sustainability Action Team, now known as Sustainable Orangeville, to plant thousands of trees and shrubs. Ms. Bradley initiated the Orangeville Community Garden and Fruit and Nut Orchard, providing garden space for citizens to grow their own food, as well as food for the Orangeville Food Bank. Under her leadership, the committee encouraged active transportation with the creation of 3 bike routes around town, and the committee linked local restaurants with county waste management and best practices for managing food waste reduction. Ms. Bradley has ensured that sustainability is incorporated into town planning documents. Her lasting legacy is the thousands of trees that have been planted since 2007, the cleaning of the Credit Valley watershed as it runs through Orangeville, and the continued environmental engagement in Orangeville. Congratulations, Sylvie Bradley. Not to take anything away from the adults, but some of the youth stories have been quite inspiring, and so our winner in the youth category is Annika Bennett. Annika brings awareness to environmental issues through school projects as well as local and international events. She participates annually in the World Wildlife Fund CN Tower Climb, and she promotes the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society and the David Suzuki Foundation. She has made presentations to her class on the impacts of one-time use plastics in our oceans. For the past 2 years, Annika has participated in the Earth Day tree planting programs at Orangeville. Please welcome me in congratulating Annika Bennett. Finally, under the group category, this year's winner is the Parkinson Public School Eco Club. Parkinson Centennial Public Schools Eco Club plans many activities with the environment in mind. The achievements by the Parkinson Eco team are significant as they set an example for the entire school and community and having an impact on the environment by reducing their waste, carbon footprint, and energy consumption. They are learning at a young age the importance of sustainability. During the current school year, the club has participated in the following programs: Battery Recycling Exchange, Bag to School Textile Campaign, Fall Walk to School Day, National Sweater Day, Juice Box Collection, Litterless Lunch Days every Tuesday, Compost and Paper Towel Campaign, the collection of class blue bins and pizza boxes from food days, as well as plastic and shopping bags to ensure they are properly recycled, Trees for School, each student received a tree seedling, Parkinson Forest and Yard April Cleanup, Eco Tickets, and Crayola Marker Recycling. Please congratulate with me Parkinson Public School. Great. So we've actually been giving these out for so long, we had to break out a brand new plaque. We're on our second one. These will all be displayed in Town Hall, at least during Earth Month and perhaps during the rest of the year, I can't say. But anyway, congratulations again to everybody.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you. Moving on in our agenda, our next presentation is Ontario Provincial Police Billing Model. We have with us tonight Linda Davis, Contract Analyst, Municipal Policing Bureau, Ontario Provincial Police. We also have Sergeant Catherine Ross from the Ontario Provincial Police, and Staff Sergeant Nicole Randall, Detachment Commander, Ontario Provincial Police. And for those in the audience and listening at home or watching at home, this information is also available on Orangeville's, Town of Orangeville website, as well as the OPP website, where there's copious information both on both websites. Ms. Davis.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Your Worship, council members, staff, and persons in the gallery. My name is Linda Davis, and I'm pleased to be here tonight to present to you an overview of the Ontario Provincial Police Billing Model. The Town of Orangeville has requested a costing through the Ministry of the Solicitor General for policing services. If a municipality decides to switch to the OPP, they will first enter into a transition contract for a period of 3+ years. The plus refers to the additional months to reach the end of the calendar year. This transition contract is required to accumulate data to be used in the newer billing model. A transition contract is based on the number of hours provided to a municipality in the measure of a full-time equivalent, or an FTE. After that term, the municipality will be charged for policing services based on our billing model that was introduced in January of 2015. Municipalities that are policed by the OPP fall into one of two categories. Either they have a formal contract as per Section 10 of the Police Services Act, or there is no contract and policing services are provided under Section 5.1 of the Act. Prior to 2015, the method of billing for each of those categories was different. It was complicated, difficult to explain, and based on many complicated measures. It also led to a wide disparity of policing costs throughout the province. Some municipalities were paying under $50 per household, while others were paying well over $800 per household. In 2012, the Office of the Auditor General of Ontario, who watches over administration of the province's finances, made recommendations to the OPP to make the billing more fair and more transparent. Local municipalities were lobbying with AMO, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, for the same thing. The previous billing model was out of date, complicated, and needed attention. After 2 years of planning, consultations, and community engagements with municipal stakeholders, a new billing model was introduced. The new model relies on a significant amount of data in order to accurately estimate policing costs for the coming year. The billing model only applied to municipalities that were already being policed by the OPP on January 1st, 2015, when it was introduced. Some municipalities, policing costs went up in price, some went down. The implementation of the billing model did not change the total cost of municipal policing, it simply reallocated the cost. The billing model is based on the rationale that all OPP policed municipalities should pay an equitable share for the provision of policing services. That no matter where they are located, either rural or urban, in Northern Ontario or Southern Ontario, there is a cost to having trained police officers available at any time of the day or night to respond to their needs, 365 days a year, with appropriate equipment and resources. There is a cost associated with this availability regardless of how often police are required. This diagram depicts the development of our billing model with its deep roots in engagement sessions and consultations with ministries, agencies, associations, and our municipalities. On the left-hand side there, each line represents a municipality and how much they were paying in 2014 prior to the model, dollars being the scale from the bottom to the top of the left side. You can see how the gap or the disparity has been addressed through the implementation of the model. So the lines that were near the bottom would be down in the 0 to $10 range, and then up at the top, probably peaking out in the $900 range. To address the transparency, new reports have been created to share with municipalities specific to their billing. Annually, we hold webinars when the statements are distributed to explain the statements, and we go out and do presentations and explanations at the request of municipalities, just as we are here tonight. And we post our information on opp.ca for public access. The billing model is provincially focused. This means it focuses on all of the municipal policing that the OPP does in the province. We recover costs from each municipality for services provided. Those costs are estimated in a prepared statement provided in the fall prior to the billing year, and then reconciled once the year of service is completed. Our model divides the majority of policing costs into two categories: base service and calls for service. The base service is how we achieve the equitable share for policing services. It's a per property cost that municipalities pay based on the number of properties in their boundaries. The rate is the same for all OPP policed municipalities. Activity covered in the base service cost includes legislated requirements, proactive policing, training, administration, and supervision. The second category, calls for service, is specific to each municipality and allocated based on their individual usage level. A municipality that has more calls for service will pay more in this area than one with fewer calls for service. While base and calls for service are the two main categories in the billing, there are some additional costs that are recovered for. These costs may or may not be applicable to each municipality. For example, if a municipality provides facilities for the OPP to work out of, they will not be billed accommodation costs. However, if the OPP is policing a municipality from their provincial detachment, then the municipality will be charged a fee for accommodation costs. Another example is court security. This would apply only to municipalities with a courthouse and not to those without a courthouse. I will speak more to these additional costs a little later in the presentation. Earlier, I mentioned that our costs are estimated in the fall and statements are delivered for the upcoming year. I would like to share with you now how we accomplish this. And this is a document that is in every billing package, and it is also available on our website. I've tried to break it down to explain it a little bit more. With the data from our activity reporting system, we determine how many full-time equivalents, or FTEs, both civilian and uniform, provided service to municipalities from our frontline detachments. This is calculated by the number of hours worked in municipal areas by OPP members. This excludes provincial work that the OPP is mandated to provide. The cost of these employees is then determined by a weighted average salary for each rank and each civilian role. For support staff and other direct operating costs, a fee per uniform FTE is applied and multiplied by the number of uniform FTEs. Once these calculations are added up, this gives us the amount of money we estimate to recover from municipalities based on previous activity. So for 2019, we calculated that we will recover $372 million for municipal policing. To split this value into the two categories of base and calls for service, we determine, using data entered by members into our activity reporting system, how much time is spent on base activities versus the amount of time that is spent on calls for service. For 2019, the split is 56.2% for base services and 43.8% for calls for service. We then apply the split to the $372 million. So with the model, if we take that $3.7 million, 56.2% will be recovered through base service, which amounts to $216 million. To determine the base cost per property, we simply divide this amount by the total amount of properties in all of our municipalities. And that's how we get the base cost of $189.54. The remainder, which is 43.8%, we recover through the calls for service. So to rephrase, in 2019, we are recovering $156 million through calls for service. Now, I'm just going to go back to the base services for a minute and show you how that would look like on a billing statement. Remember now, base services covers the existence of your police officers, the legislated and proactive activities and duties they perform, and the resources and the training that they require. The number of properties is sourced by the Municipal Properties Assessment Corporation, or MPAC, and is updated annually. The base service cost for 2019, as I mentioned, is $189.54 per property. This is a sample billing statement for a municipality with approximately 5,000 properties in it. It's a fictitious sample billing statement, and the first portion deals with the base billing. It lists the property counts that were provided to us by MPAC and shows the total base cost to the municipality. And as you'll see there's the household count, the commercial and industrial count. It gives you the total properties. You multiply the total properties by $189.54, and the base cost for this municipality would be $942,000. Now for the calls for service category. The calls for service costs represent the municipal costs related to policing services that are typically reactive in nature. A municipality pays a proportionate share of the total cost of municipal calls calculated for the province. We had stated that we will recover $156 million through calls for service. So the price tag for all municipal calls for service, or 100%, is $156 million. Each municipality's 4 years of reactive calls for service are included, and an average is determined, as you can see in column A. The OPP chose to go with a 4-year average as opposed to calls in a single year to help mitigate any extreme fluctuations in calls, either up or down, that could occur in any given year. As some calls take longer to deal with than others, we have grouped our reactive calls for service into 9 groups called billing work groups. Each work group has a time standard that represents the average time required to deal with those types of calls from start to finish. The time standards are reflected in column B, and these standards are determined from our activity reporting system and are updated annually. The average number of calls are then multiplied by the time standard to determine the total weighted time as shown in column C. The municipality's percentage of weighted hours is then calculated from the total weighted time of all municipalities. So you'll see here, this particular municipality's total weighted time adds up to 7,997 hours, and that represents 0.4984% of the 100%. As such, they pay 0.4984% of the $156 million, which in turn turns into $781,000 for calls for service. Included in each municipality's billing statement is a comprehensive list of the types of reactive calls in their area. Municipal Policing Bureau has provided a tool on our public website at opp.ca to calculate the calls for service portion with your 4 years of data. This will estimate how much your volume of calls may have represented had your municipality been part of the 2019 billing period. Going back to the sample statement, the next item reflects the calls for service count and the municipality's percentage of all municipal workload. You'll notice here, you will see that the total for all municipalities was $156 million. Listed has been the municipal portion, which is 0.4984%, and that turns into the $781,000 that we figured would be for their calls for service. To calculate the cost per property, we simply divide the $781,000 by the number of properties in this municipality. So if we divide that by the 4,972, then you'll see that the cost per property for this municipality is $157.17 for calls for service. This slide will show the last 5 years of our billing model. The amount recovered through base services is represented in the blue. The base services cost per property for each year by the black line, and the amount recovered from calls for service in the green. Overall, the model has proven to be quite stable over the past 5 years. Earlier, we talked about additional cost components. There are actually 5 areas. I have listed 3 here, as they are the 3 that would apply to the town of Orangeville. For overtime costs, municipalities are billed for overtime resulting from occurrences in their geographic area. An average from previous years is used as an estimate. Overtime recovery is limited to municipal detachment staff and not our investigation specialists from regional or general headquarters. At the end of the billing period, this will be reconciled with the actual overtime costs. Court security would be applicable to Orangeville, as the courts are located here in town. It is based on the cost of the staff in the detachment area required to provide designated court security activities. 2019 costs are based on 2017 activity and will be reconciled to actual at the end of the billing period. Prisoner transportation costs are allocated to municipalities on a per property basis. It represents the cost of staff providing prisoner transportation services in the province. A standard per property cost has been calculated based on 2017 activities, and it's currently $2.27 per property. These costs will be reconciled to actual 2019 costs at the end of the billing period. The other 2 components that are not listed here are accommodations and cleaning costs and enhancements. Since the town of Orangeville would be providing a building to work from, they would not be charged for accommodation costs. Enhancements are extra personnel that the town may choose to hire for the duration of a contract. They are optional and not necessarily required. Going back to our billing statement, these additional cost components appear at the bottom part of a bill. In this example, all components have been billed. Please keep in mind that while some components, like prisoner transport and accommodation cleaning costs, are per property rates, which is the $2.27 or the $4.90 for those two line items. The other costs per property have been actually calculated by dividing the total costs by the number of properties. And we simply do this to determine the cost per property. It would not be the same for every municipality. To summarize, the way we've calculated our 2019 cost recovery, we said that we would recover $216 million through base service costs, $156 million through calls for service cost, and then would result in another $38 million being collected either through the overtime, court security, accommodations, enhancements, and prisoner transportation. For a total, we expect to recover $410 million from municipalities this year. This final slide shows the total amount of money recovered each year from municipalities in the blue and what the average cost per property has been each year. The average cost per property over the last 5 years has remained relatively stable, varying between $350 and $360 per property. So this concludes my presentation on the billing model. I hope that this information has been helpful. There are other more generic presentations on the same topic available on opp.ca. I chose today to explain how costs are arrived at annually to help illustrate the difference between the transition contract and the billing model. Using your own property counts and occurrence data, estimations can be made for base service cost and the calls for service portion using the estimator tool that's available at opp.ca. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Any questions from council? Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Yes, through you, Your Worship. Just for clarification, last year we had a tragic incident just to the west of us. That must have cost a lot of money and a lot of time. Who would cover the cost? Is that averaged out, or would that be billed to the particular municipality?
It would depend on the location of the incident and the type, not necessarily the type of the incident, but possibly. So if it happened in a neighboring municipality, it would be the responsibility of the municipality. If it was on a provincial highway, depending on the nature of the incident, it could be a provincially mandated occurrence that would not be billed to a municipality. And the last situation is depending on the type of incident it was. For example, if it was an impaired driver, that is not a billable service, and it's just absorbed through the provincial portion of our budget.
Thank you. So I just wanted to just go back to the last slide there, Ms. Davis. So over the last 6 years, the average cost to a property owner in who is receiving OPP services has remained steady for 6 years straight.
Yes, since 2014.
Okay, great. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation, very helpful. I'm just curious about courtrooms in particular and how you decide what that funding model looks like. So, for example, currently Orangeville Police has a fair number of staff that are there. The building is protected in a fairly high level. I'm just curious how that billing model works out, and would you compare what we currently have, or does the OPP have their own way of coming up with what that is for courtroom costs?
Last proposal that was made to council 2 years ago, there was a accommodation for 7 court security officers that would be maintained in that billing model, and it would be the work of those officers that would be used to determine the court security costs. I would suspect that in future going forward, the special constables that are retained to work in the courthouse. It would be their hours and the hours of any of the other members that are in the courthouse, and all of that is tracked through our activity reporting system. It's that system that requires us to collect the information for a town during the transition contract, because it collects who was working, where they were working, and what they were doing.
So those officers, sorry, Your Worship, so those officers would have the ability to influence the decision for what the future billing model would make? They would say, hey, we didn't have enough people, it's very busy here, we need more officers on duty, or is it?
Responsibility of the detachment commander to make sure that the courthouse would be staffed appropriately, and we would use what has been provided to us from Orangeville Police Service to allow the same staffing that is currently there.
Allow the same staffing. So
Yeah.
what we see today, we would have tomorrow.
I believe that you'll see that information when the costing proposal is delivered to the town of Orangeville. I can tell you right now that in the last proposal that was made, it was for seven special constables to do that function, which I believe currently there are a few full-time members and several part-time members that the town uses.
Thank you.
Any other questions from councilors? Seeing none. Thank you very much, ladies, for your presentation. Appreciate that. Okay. Moving on to 7.3. We have a delegation, Elaine St. Pierre from Canadian Blood Services. Elaine, are you here? Okay. Her mic's not on there, Madam Clerk. Oh, okay.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Elaine, and I'm the Territory Manager for Canadian Blood Services. I am responsible for filling our blood donation events with eligible donors. As there are many new faces on council, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to come before you today and just summarize a little bit about what we do in case you're not aware. Canadian Blood Services is responsible for the national supply of blood and blood products, stem cells, and related services in all provinces and territories, with the exclusion of Quebec, which has their own system called Quebec. Well, why do we do that? It's just a fact. Half of us are going to need blood or know someone who will at some point in our life. And yet it may surprise you to learn that only 4% of eligible Canadians donate blood. My job is to change that. At Canadian Blood Services, we are responsible for recruiting and collecting blood, plasma, and platelets at 36 permanent donation sites and more than 14,000 mobile donation events, including the ones we have right here in Orangeville. For the last 10 years or so, this center image has been our logo. And you know what? 38% of Canadians still identified us with the Red Cross. And the fact is, we have had nothing to do with the Red Cross, other than that we were born out of the crisis, which is commonly referred to now as the tainted blood scandal, back in the 1980s when the blood supply was managed in Canada by the Red Cross. So this was definitely time for a rebranding. And as of September 28th of last year, when we celebrated our 20th anniversary, this image on the far right is our new look. While we were born out of crisis, over the last 20 years, we have earned the privilege of serving Canadians, and our new brand reflects that promise to Canadians and the changes we've seen within our organization. Our anniversary brought about a new mission and revised values. After all, we are now more than just blood. We focus on life essentials for transfusion and transplantation, including blood, plasma, stem cells, and organs and tissues. Our new logo uses the infinity symbol to represent the infinite connections of donors, recipients, healthcare partners, governments, funders, and employees, while the double shape and color focuses on the dual focus on transfusion and transplantation. So now that you know who we are and what we do and why, I'd like to give Council a little bit of an update on the blood collection events here in Orangeville, more importantly to ask for your future support in joining Canada's Lifeline. So in Orangeville, we host a blood drive every month, always on a Monday. It's usually the last Monday of the month. So it is happening right now. We're probably just wrapping up over at the Best Western. While each of the last 2 years have had those 12 events, you'll see that the overall collection targets were different each year. That is mainly due to the fact when the event is scheduled on a holiday, which it sometimes is here in Orangeville, we do tend to lower our targets slightly. But as you can see, the total number of collections from the Orangeville community has increased year over year by 57 donations, which is roughly 4.3%, which is fantastic. What's more impressive is the number of new donors or first-time donors. This has also increased year over year. Last year, just over 10% of the collections in Orangeville came from first-time donors, which is absolutely fantastic to see. What is important to know is that we attribute much of our success to the support that we receive from the town of Orangeville. I think it was just around, I think it's about 2 years ago, Christmas or so of 2017, a colleague of mine came to present to town council. We had an event scheduled on Christmas Eve, and just 3 weeks before Christmas Eve, the event was booked at 9%. I think we had 15 or 16 donors committed to come on Christmas Eve. But the town of Orangeville sprang into action, adopting that clinic and actually helping to promote to both staff and residents, and we not only hit our Christmas Eve target that year, but we collected 16 extra donations. So similarly, this past December 2018, we received incredible support from the town on social media for a New Year's Eve event that we had, and once again, we exceeded our target. So the plan is to continue with a monthly event in Orangeville. Happy for this year. We have avoided statutory holidays in the scheduling, so all events will have a target to collect 120 blood donations for a total of 1,440 donations for the year. Now, to quantify what that could actually mean to a patient in need, 1,440 donations is enough to help 180 leukemia patients through treatment for 1 week. I will note that while we have managed to avoid stat holidays, if you recognize any of the dates up there, you will see that a lot of them fall on a council meeting. But we do open at 2 p.m., so you still have time to make it out to council. I am here today to ask for your support, to be quite honest. Since many of you are new to council, I really just want to hit home and make you aware of the vital role that you can play in our success. As the leaders of the community, you do have a loud voice and can assist us greatly in helping to promote our clinics to the residents of Orangeville. I would like to give special mention, if I may, Your Worship, to Councillor Post, who in the past, prior to joining council, has been a great advocate for our cause and has encouraged her network to join the Lifeline, and she's herself a donor, and she's very committed to our cause. So I would like to thank you for that myself. We are really active on social media, operating a regional Twitter account under the handle of Lifeline Barrie, which is our central location where we have a permanent center. I would encourage you all to give us a follow and share to your own social media accounts. You can think of blood donation as that checkbook alternative to charitable giving. Those of you who are not able to donate, you can still encourage someone around you to do so. The more people we tell, the greater chance we have of meeting our goals, which ultimately is to ensure that every hospital patient has the blood that they need when they need it. Booking an appointment is very, very easy. Can be done either online through our Give Blood app or by calling us at 1-888-2DONATE. If the timing of the Orangeville event doesn't suit you, luckily you can go onto our website, blood.ca, and find an event that's near to you and fits in your schedule. We do run events throughout Dufferin County as well as nearby Caledon, so there's lots of opportunities to donate. And that is limited time for me, so if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Councillor Andrews.
Well, through you, Your Worship, Ms. St. Pierre, thank you very much for what your organization does and continues to do. I have incredible admiration for what you have accomplished and will continue. And also I have admiration for Councillor Post and others on our council who have taken the time to contribute in different ways. For those of us who've gone through, be that a variety of different situations where we either require support, it really hits home. And I think that, us being representatives of our community, and again, we are new to this role, but we're not new to what you do. And again, I think that we have an avenue to communicate in as broad a way as possible. We will certainly support that. And again, I even saw your truck this evening prior to the council meeting, and I really like your rebranding too, by the way. So congratulations on what you do.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, thank you as well for the presentation, for reminding the community about what this is all about and to take action. Quick question for you, if you don't mind. Do you know the threshold from a population perspective that triggers a permanent location? Obviously, we're not at that population, but and also as a follow-up, what is the nearest permanent location for folks that may be, in and around the area?
I can't really speak to what the quantity of a population or donor base, for example, would say. I'll give you the example, though, of the population of Newmarket. We host events, I think there's 4 different locations, venues that have regularly scheduled events like the one here in Orangeville with the similar targets of, 100 to 150 donations per, and they don't have a permanent clinic. So that can be quantified. Your closest one, it depends on what direction you're heading. If you're heading south towards the city, then we do have a permanent center that's located very strategically at Heartland Town Center, the corner of Lotus and Britannia. It is open 6 days a week, so it's not open on Sunday. If you're heading north, then the closest one would be our Barrie, which is the very south end of Barrie, off of Bayview Drive.
Very good. Okay. Elaine, thank you very much. And for those who are listening or in the gallery, giving blood is a fairly easy and painless thing to do. It's a pleasant experience. The people that work there are very caring and usually get a little treat at the end. So, and I think all of us in this room, if we haven't already, somebody in our family or our extended network of friends is needing blood, at some point in their life. I think all of us are probably going to be in that category. So thank you for what you do, and appreciate you coming in to remind us about this today. Thank you. Okay, moving along. We 7.4, the delegation has been withdrawn, so we're going to move on to 7.5. Mr. Bruce Blears from the Amaranth Lions. Mr. Blears.
Thank you, Your Worship, Mayor Brown, Orangeville councillors, Orangeville town employees, and ladies and gentlemen. I'm the president of the Amaranth Lions Club, and we've been serving Orangeville and District for 21 years, thanks to our sponsorship from the Orangeville Lions. We're basically a club that serves rather than raises funds. Right now, 2 of our members are at the blood donor clinic helping out. We just took down the green ribbons, thanks to Lion Michelle and Lion Richard, who are here tonight, and that was to promote the organ and tissue donation program, Trillium Gift of Life. And when we started in Orangeville, about 23% of people were donating, or were on the list for donations. It's a website, beadonor.ca. And now we're up around 45 to 50% in this town, but there's towns like Sudbury, I think, that are up around 55%. So there's always room for improvement. I'd like to say that the issue tonight, we had a lady come forward that has an autistic child. She's a resident of Orangeville, and actually she's right down at the dog guide's school. She's receiving a dog this week for her 5-year-old with autism, and she came to us asking if we could help. She wants to pay it forward. She wants to have a dog walk, and we've planned it for May 26th. On the agenda, it said May 29th, but it's Sunday, May the 26th, and we hope to use the pavilion in the Browns Farm Park for about 2 hours in the morning. We're going to start at 9, and we should be out of there by 11. We found out that there's a $75 charge for that. We're hoping that could be waived. 100% of the funds raised and I think we're already up to 48,000. This lady has been gung-ho to get money to Dog Guides of Canada, and it's a Lions Foundation. It costs about $25,000 a year to raise one dog, and they provide about 7 types of dogs for people that need them. They started out with seeing eye dogs, hearing dogs, wheelchair helper dogs. They've got autistic helper dogs, and they've got diabetes dogs, plus a couple of others. So we're just asking the town to waive that $75 fee. It would just mean that it would come from our community budget. It would be $75 less that would go to the community of Orangeville and area.
Right, okay. Well, thank you for your presentation. We've got Councillor Taylor would like to say some words. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Blair, for your presentation. For those of us, the mayor included, who are on social causes, I guess, you know, events such as the Lions Service Clubs, thank you, I'm stumbling tonight, optimists and whatnot, certainly appreciate the work you do in the community, and I guess to the rest of council, I'd just like to make a motion that we approve this and move forward, and congratulate your club on doing such great work for the community.
Seconder, Deputy Mayor McIntosh, all in favor? Okay, thank you, Mr. Blears, and good luck on the walk. I know.
If anybody has a dog, please come and attend. 9 o'clock Sunday morning, May the 26th.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Bruce. Okay, moving along on our agenda, we have no statutory public meetings and we have no consent motions, so we have staff reports now. 10.1, this is a recommendation that we approve the appointment of RLB LLP as auditors for the town of Orangeville for fiscal years 2018 to 2022, or 2022, sorry. Councillor Post make recommendation or motion, and Councillor Andrews second. All in favor? Thank you. One quick question, Mr. Brennan. I believe you told me that there was some cost savings associated with this. Can you elaborate a little bit on this?
Your Worship, as identified in the report, it's average about $40,000 a year over the next 5 years, around $200,000. I haven't got the exact number what the last couple of years has cost us, but this proposal was a fair amount cheaper than the next closest by almost $100,000. Right. So over 5 years.
Right. Thank you. Okay. Moving along, 10.2. This is a recommendation that council approve the funding agreement with Credit Valley Conservation Authority and the town of Mono for a period of 5 years, from January 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2023, for continuing funding of the Vicky Barron Lakeside Trail, which is, of course, the trail around Island Lake, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the funding agreement. May I have a motion to accept this? Councillor Peters, seconded by Councillor Post. All in favor? Thank you. 10.3, this is waste diversion for residential demolition projects. That a report, waste diversion for residential demolition projects be received, and the council provide direction to staff with respect to introducing waste management diversion requirements for residential demolition applications in accordance with one of the 3 described in the body of the report. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. To me, I thank Mr. Jones for the report. I don't really see an issue with what's been put forth or how we're standing today. I don't see a lot of upside in changing the process as we have it. So I would put forth that we accept option 1, and which would be status quo.
Okay. Further commentary, Councillor Peters. Councillor Peters.
I'll let you get a second if you want that to be on the floor before we start the conversation. But
I'll second that.
okay.
Go ahead.
So now I can let council know, as expected, I won't be supporting the do-nothing option. Without sort of getting into a ton of details and up on the soapbox, I think we have the opportunity here to be a leader. I've prepared some numbers with respect to demolition waste. I am somewhat in the industry, having dealt with commercial building projects for the last decade plus. So just to put some things in context, if you bear with me for a moment. So I spoke to the County of Dufferin about our residential waste status, if you will, to put some things into context. So the average household in Dufferin generates about 851 kilograms of material in a given year. So that's sort of our baseline from a residential perspective. Our diversion rate for the county is about 57%. So if I translate that to, for example, the application for 31 Town Line, which is the first one that sort of started this discussion, it is about 1,500 square foot building, using an average number from the US EPA, who's done a lot of work in this area. It averages about 750 kilograms per square meter of demolition. So that translates to about 112,000 kilograms of waste from a single demolition project. To put that in perspective, that's 132 households worth of waste as a comparison, of which currently 0 is mandated. So we have households generating far, far less with a much higher diversion rate. I think this is an opportunity. There are well-established frameworks, both provincially and in the sort of private and green building world, that I think could be adopted. Just one more comparison. So when you look at new construction, the best practice in the industry is about 36 kilograms per square meter of construction area. So obviously you generate a lot less waste on a new project than you do from a demolition project, because most of the materials are going into that building itself. This is only about 5% of the demolition number. So we're generating 20 times more waste for a demolition project than a new construction project, and that's comparing to best practices in the industry. So I think, you know, as we see more infill applications in this town, we're going to see more demolition permits. As we see more demolition permits, I think we're in a position now to set the stage, to be a leader, to make sure that waste is diverted to some degree, or at least the planning process encourages that type of thinking and that type of process in the industry. So I'll leave it at that.
Great. I did a little bit of research myself, Councillor Peters, and I talked to a couple of people in the demolition business, and they explained to me that part of their normal business practice is to recycle, and they talked about brick and concrete block as being items that they specifically separate. They talked about any steel, aluminum, copper. They talked about wood products. All of these things are part of their standard procedure when they demolish a property. And the one fellow said to me, in fact, in our case, not a lot goes to landfill. He felt a lot of his demolition sites were being recycled without sort of mandated by the governments. If they can recycle, they actually create income for their companies, and that's what they do. But I'm, you know, I think until such, and we've only had, I think, 4 or 5 demolitions in the last 5 years or so in our town, so it's not a huge problem right now. And I agree with you, as we intensify the density in this town, there's going to be more demolition, clearly. But I think the status quo is satisfactory myself at this point. So I'm here to support Mr. Taylor's motion at this point. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. I thank you, Councillor Taylor, for putting the motion for status quo. However, I'm not quite ready to support that right at this time, because when we're initially considering imposing a waste management plan condition, I actually think that option 2, where we bring it in the official plan to review the exercise underway, is an opportunity to add stronger policies to enhance the town's objectives and expectations for waste management and diversion practices in the redevelopment and construction process. So I would wonder if you would be just mindful of option 2 and bringing it into the official plan. I think that would be a great way for us to start, and it sends a message out to people that the town is very mindful of waste. But I don't want to over inundate people with all kinds of rules and regulations. You've got the province giving them rules, and how many laws do we have to keep putting on people? But I think covering it in our official plan under option 2, that's where I'd like to see it go.
Fair enough. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just provide a bit of feedback on some of the discussion so far. I understand that the industry will take advantage of recycling practices where it's convenient and where it is economical. I don't believe that's enough, and I also don't necessarily believe that that's occurring at the level that we'd like to see in our town or in our country, to be honest. So I'd like to see something with a little more teeth. I'd like to see a little more documentation on that. I'd like some proof in the pudding, if you will. Not to argue with any conversations you've had along the way, but we had a delegate tell us that they did not want to go through this process. If they were doing it anyway, I'd like to believe they would have been on board with that mandate at the time. So again, I'm going to be pushing for as full of a compliance as we can. It's relatively simple. It's cost effective, as you mentioned. It would boost the businesses around town and in the area for those that provide recycling services. So I certainly wouldn't support option 1. I could see it building into an official plan and working the momentum that way if we can't get all the way tonight.
Okay. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I won't be supporting this motion. I would, however, support the second item on the list. Having spent the last couple of days watching a house be demolished just down the end of my street, it's going into a big bin and it's going away. There's nothing being done, regardless of what we're hearing out there in some instances, and I was rather shocked, to say the least. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. I just, not to belabor the point, I feel like we are creating unnecessary red tape. I think that the issue is a small one. I think our staff are going to be focusing on significant issues over the next period of time, and this isn't something that I would advocate allowing them to spend their time on. So I still hold firm to, I think we just move on here. This is something we should accept where we are today, which is just fine, and move forward with status quo.
Okay, any further discussion? We have a motion on the floor that's been seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that motion fails. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. I would now like to put a motion on the floor that we adopt, just 2, which...
Second option?
The second option, yes.
And seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Any further comment on that? We'll call a vote. All in favor? Opposed? That motion passes 4-3 with Peters and Taylor and Brown in opposition. Okay, moving on. 11.1, we have Committee of Adjustment minutes for the meetings of February 6th and April 3rd. We want a motion to receive those minutes. Councillor Peters, seconded by Councillor Post. All in favor? Okay, number 12, question period. Any questions from the audience? Please step up and state your name and address, please, for the record.
Angelina May, 14 Pheasant Court, 19 L9W 4K1.
Thank you, ma'am.
I listened to the OPP presentation this evening, and just like last time,
Ma'am, you have 3 minutes, so can you ask your question, please?
I'm wondering if council will take into account all the things that were taken into account the last time the OPP issue came forward, as far as what to do with our existing Orangeville Police Service, what to do with our municipal bylaws, because OPP doesn't cover that. And also, I think it's an insult to the town of Orangeville to have a presentation on a population of 5,000 when we are 8 times that population. So I'm wondering if we're starting from square one, or are we going to look back and see the issues that were there last time and take them into account?
Well, let me correct you first of all on your statement. You said 5,000 population. It was actually 5,000 doors, 5,000 residences. That's what the presentation was on tonight.
Yes.
Not 5,000 people. So,
Oh, yes.
okay. And secondly, municipal bylaws, OPP will enforce municipal bylaws if they're our police service. That will happen.
No, last
Well-
time that was an extra cost.
I don't believe so, ma'am. I don't believe so.
Well,
They will be our police service, and they will enforce our municipal bylaws. Anyway, moving on, our intention here, and we unanimously decided to revisit the OPP costing, and we're going to be doing that. It's going to be open, fair, and transparent. We're going to learn everything we can about both services once again, and we may hire a consultant. That's something we're considering right now in order to provide a greater level of transparency than happened last time. We're going to have open and public question periods. We're going to give as much information as we can. And I think as the people responsible for passing budgets here in Orangeville, when we see costing that is half the cost of presented tonight of our cost of policing, that we have to look at this seriously. And to suggest that the OPP cannot provide an equal service here is not true. They will, they can, and they're doing it right now in 140 municipalities that are under contract to them. So I think you're going to have to let this process roll. We're gonna be as open as we can. We're going to allow questions. We're going to allow additional questions to OPP from the public. It will happen in future meetings that we will host over the summer. But we're going to be as open and fair and truthful as we can be. And at that point, after all is said and done, there'll be a decision made by this council. We don't know what that decision is going to be yet, but we'll have all of the information. I think more information than was put forward last time. So, any other council members wish to respond? Thank you for your question, ma'am. Anybody else? Mr. Gristo, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, member of the council. Well, I think you addressed the question I was going to ask related to the OPP. One thing I found pretty strange, that the OPP made a presentation, but it was not received by council, unless things change here. But my understanding that report should have been received, and I was expect more when received, that in the future will be public meetings related to that issue. So I think the lady asked, and you mentioned that there will be public meetings, because I can tell you, from what I seen there tonight, I don't think I learned anything.
You didn't learn anything tonight?
No.
Okay.
From what I am aware. The only thing I learned though tonight, because they spell it out, that there'll be 2 ways that there will be build a municipality. One will be the base, and one will be per calls.
That's right.
That is why they give you 3 years plus, because they want to make sure what the cost is.
Correct.
But by the time, of course, our own police force is gone, what are you going to do with it? So I hope that you guys keep an open mind on that as it goes forward.
I'm sure we
So
will.
that, okay, go ahead.
You have a question, though, Mr. Grosso?
Yeah, the other question I have, many people has brought to my attention, why is it not televised on Channel 63 on Rogers? Now, I spoke to some of the Rogers people, they're telling me it's the town problem here, that's why it's not televised. What is it? Is it the town problem? Is it Rogers' problem? What is it? Maybe through you to staff, to Mr. Brano, whoever can answer the question.
Yeah, we're working on it, Mr. Gristo, and we want, the council, we all want this to be on Rogers as well, because it's the easiest way to deliver the information to, particularly to seniors. I've had many phone calls, I think other members of council have. There are some technical glitches we're trying to work through, but we do absolutely want to have this on Rogers. And just last week, there was a meeting here at Town Hall with technical staff from Rogers, with Rogers production staff, and with our IT people. And we're working through it. I know it's been 4 or 5 months now, and it's frustrating, but we are working towards this, and we hope to have it resolved in the next short period of time.
And you're quite correct, Mr. Mayor, that actually is the senior that they brought to my attention.
Yeah.
A lot of them, they can go to YouTube to see it. I mean, I have no problem, but a lot of them, they do, so, and that's why. So I'm glad to see that you guys are working on. So
Appreciate
the
it.
sooner, the better.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
100%. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for your guys' time.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the gallery? Seeing none, we will move on now to item 13, which is correspondence, and we've got a number of items of correspondence. Do any council members wish to speak to any of these issues, or shall we receive them in bulk? Okay, let's go. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and not sure who would end up accepting this particular question, but I'm assuming it might be the clerk. This is pertaining to item 13.2, use of Orangeville Council chambers for Dufferin meetings. And the question is, has a costing review, or is there a costing that will be charged to the County of Dufferin for usage of this space?
Mr. Brennan.
Your Worship, through you, I've been speaking with the CAO of the county, and we have put forward a cost to get our mics upgraded to be able to host the county council, plus the cost that it would be for staff and rental. And we will negotiate, we'll talk about it, negotiate it, and then come back with a fair price.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. Actually, 13.2 was also going to be a question. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. I think you covered over what I was asking for. Was just making sure that this wasn't something, and maybe you can clarify, Mr. Brennan. You don't need our council approval for us to rent out. This is all part of the regular rentals, and you're going to be charging a fee to them to use the facility. And any upgrades to our system will come at a cost to them, correct?
Your Worship, through you, that is correct. But we will, once we start talking about this, and just for clarity for those listening, it is the county council that are proposing that they may host some of their meetings or their meetings going forward in our chambers. In order to do that, we need some upgrades on our hardware and software systems. We'll need to reconfigure a little bit in here. We will need staff at nighttime to support the meetings, to lock up our buildings afterwards, the cleaning, and there is a base rental cost as well. I'm looking at Mr. Osmond because I think that base cost is already based on our rates and fees that council has approved. So if there's a requirement to come back to council, we certainly will, and we'll probably come back with an information item regardless. At this stage, I think the county council, once everything is in play, they may come and maybe do 1 or 2 meetings just to trial it. So there'll be some options there to see if it will work for them or not going forward.
Right, and just to give some further background, as a member of Dufferin County Council, Dufferin County Councilor John Creelman made a motion to Dufferin County Council to improve communication to residents and wanted to mimic what we're doing in terms of getting it onto YouTube and perhaps onto Rogers again. That'll be some further discussion, but certainly onto YouTube. And it was his motion that was passed by County Council, and they investigated the courthouse building, and the cost were deemed to be exorbitant to try and retrofit that older building. Hence the reason for reaching out to us, because we've already invested quite a lot in our audio-visual and our new council chambers. So that's a bit of the history there on that. Councillor McIntosh, or Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mine was also 13.2. I just wanted to stress, too, that it was also the space that we have at the county council. Having sat there now for 4 months, it's pretty tight, and it's much more open and better for usage in here. So that was also part of the reason that they wanted to.
Right. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. There's quite a few items that are in the government package. Will it be appropriate to talk to them now, or are you going to come to them at a later point, or how would we?
Go ahead. Why don't we talk to it now? Sure.
Okay. I'm not looking for necessarily discussion on well, maybe I'm looking for discussion, or resolution would probably be the better word, but I just want to make sure the public and fellow councillors are aware of some of those things in there that I found quite interesting or concerning. The first one is soon we'll all be able to crack our favorite bottle of Bud in our local parks, and I'm looking forward to going to KC Gardens and sitting there with a keg and having a few beers. I think, you know, we're all going to find out what this means, but I'd just like to say I find it concerning that we're down this path. I worry about it for the town and what that could mean and the responsibilities of that. And I know staff will be all over this, and we'll figure out a way. But that would be my first concern. I can go through a list here as we have them, or we could, maybe there's other people.
You can make comment if you'd like.
Okay,
Go ahead.
thank you. The next one that I think the public needs to be aware of is the public health. You know, they've adjusted the provincial municipal cost sharing of the public health funding. And, you know, all of us should be aware again of what that's going to mean to us as taxpayers and as councillors in terms of our budget process as we go forward. We do not have the answers to this as we sit here. I couldn't answer it, nor could I begin to interpret what it potentially means, but the public needs to be aware of what's happening there. The third one that I find very interesting, it was an election platform or election discussion, I shouldn't say platform, election discussion for many, was the broadband piece. This area is in requirement of it. There's been some funding that's been put out for that, and I guess I just want to make sure, and it's maybe potentially a silly thing to say because I know staff will be on this, but I want to make sure that we're going to be getting our fair share of that. The list continues on as we go through. There was some funding announcements about local transit. I haven't seen anything from staff as of yet. I imagine it's still working its way through the process, but I'll be really curious to see what we're going to do with the funding that comes to Orangeville for that and start to talk about a plan. So, you know, if you're living in the town and you're using transit, something is coming of some sort here, which I can't speak to. And then the last one is this this whole piece on the education property tax. And again, I've got pieces of information here, but you know, the projected increase.
Is this the development charges?
It is.
Yeah.
An average annual rate of almost 1%. You know, this will impact overall the taxpayers as well. Council itself isn't necessarily able to do anything about these things, but the overall rate that Orangeville and Dufferin County residents will pay will be affected by it as we go along. And then my last one is the Minto piece. The town of Minto had some concerns, and I'm wondering if we should also send a letter in support of the Minto resolution, stating that the town of Orangeville also has concerns about some of these budgetary requirements or changes that are going in and how it's going to impact us as well from a monetary standpoint. I guess my last piece would be all of us, we all knew each other before we were elected, and the big thing was, hey, let's make sure we're mindful of the taxpayer, and all of a sudden things that are out of our control are at us here. So I think we should attack what we can.
I think it's very difficult right now because the landscape really hasn't settled yet on all of these issues. On the development charges, I think I read that development charges from education development charges haven't been raised in something like 10 years. So a $300 increase, and I think it's going to continue for 5 years. Are you aware of this, Mr. Jones? Or on development charges for education?
Your worship, I'm not really up to speed on development charges for education, I'm afraid.
Right. However, development charges are something that are borne by new home buyers, and if the education system feels they need additional development charges to help build schools and such, I think we're probably going to be faced with that. That's going to happen. So, but thank you for bringing all of those issues up. Anything further from anybody? I'm wondering if we could have a motion then to receive all of the items for correspondence under item 13, from 13.1 to 13.7. Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, we have information item 14.1, annual building permit report. And this is a recommendation from staff that the information item listed above be received. Councillor Taylor.
I'm sorry, Your Worship, so just back to the piece about Minto and supporting, could I make a motion that this council also support with a letter that provides affirmation?
Okay, what specifically is in the Minto letter that you'd like?
They were concerned about the downloading of costs, and we're writing the government to share their concerns.
Okay. Seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Okay. I guess I'm wondering, yes, Madam Clerk. No, notice of motion for next meeting. Maybe we can work on some wording in the interim and come up with an Orangeville response rather than just. But we'll let Minto lead us into the discussion. Okay, let's have that notice of motion then. Thank you. So back to 14.1. This is that this information item listed be received. May I have a motion for that? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. All in favor? And then on to 15. We get 15.1. This is a notice of motion that was given prior to our meeting by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. And this is to talk to asking staff to look into traffic signal synchronization on Broadway. Deputy Mayor McIntosh, did you want to comment on this at all? Or? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's interesting, over the last 2 weeks, I've heard a lot of comments about this. Most of them are in favor. A few people didn't know the motion was coming and were asking for one. So it makes me feel good that this is something that people care about. And just today on Broadway, I was trying to get up there, and First Street couldn't turn on to Broadway because the lights at John Street were red. Like, we need to do something, and I think this will help the traffic flow, help the environment, and just generally make it less angry people, I hope.
Okay, so Deputy Mayor McIntosh is going to make the motion here, seconded by Councillor Peters. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you. So we did number 16, notice of motion at the meeting. Councillor Taylor has just made a notice of motion at the meeting. We have, I believe, no unfinished business unless any councillors. I'm sorry, Councillor Taylor, you wish to speak?
Yeah, just as an unfinished business, there is significant issues happening currently with the library, and I've read what's happening with the library, and I don't mean to put my fellow councillors on the spot, Councillor Peters and Councillor Post, but I think it would be good to explain what's going on with the library and have people aware of what this is and make up their own minds whether or not it's an issue. But I think it's a significant one that's going to impact our services in the town moving forward. Just
Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Taylor. So we had a board meeting last week, I suppose it was. We're still digesting exactly what those changes look like and how they impact the service. Obviously, the funding cut to the Southern Ontario Library Service, or SOLS, will have an impact on a variety of services. The board made a motion at that point to come to council with a letter outlining exactly what the impacts are to town and to look for council support of that letter back to the government. So we will likely see that. I can't say when, but shortly, once both staff and the board have had a chance to digest and take a stand on exactly how it impacts the town.
And Councillor Peters, is that specific to the Southern Ontario Library Service and Northern Ontario Library Service? I guess the service which allows transfer of books amongst libraries, is that specifically what you're talking about? Sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, so one of the major pieces was the removal of funding for the interlibrary loan service, which allows us to share our collection with other municipalities and vice versa. So that was a big piece of it, but the CEO of the library, Darla Fraser, is also looking at the other trickle-down impacts of provincial budgets and funding cuts to SOLs. So it may not just be that singular issue, but that is certainly the one that has the most direct and immediate impact on the library.
Great. Okay, thank you. All right, moving on. We have item 18, new business. So this is a recommendation that council approve participation in a joint meeting with councils of all area municipalities within the County of Dufferin on Wednesday, May 22nd at Menora Park Pavilion in accordance with Section 236 2 of the Municipal Act for the consideration of matters of common interest, specifically the County of Dufferin Strategic Plan. May I have a motion to approve this recommendation? Councillor Post, second by Councillor Taylor. All in favor? Thank you. And then we have 19, which I need a motion to for the confirming bylaw. Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. All in favor? Thank you. And we need a motion for adjournment. Councillor Peters, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. All in favor? Thank you, everyone.